Hello everyone, my name is Ramba Mamba, and in this quick episode, we will learn how to randomly instantiate a game object in the case where you don't want something so random, but you want something to be kind of like a controlled, nice, even random. For example, if I want to spawn a player at a certain during a game, I wouldn't I and I had the locations of a cliff, a campfire, and a waterfall. I wouldn't want my player to randomly instantiate in the middle of the water. That's just weird, right? Rather, it'd be nice if I could make it still random, but random to the point where it has its options to choose between uh, instantiating at the campfire, at the top of the waterfall, or for example, sitting at the cliff or something like that. So I have my empty project that I named random, but you can add this onto any project that you've been working on, and I simply added a plane. That's it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a game object that I want to be randomly instantiated. So I'll make a cube, and I'll set the position to 0.50. If you're already working on a game, you probably already have the object that you want to be instantiated randomly. For example, this could be your player, or as one viewer requested, they wanted to randomly instantiate uh, asteroids, but they don't want it to be so random that they were clumped together in a weird manner. So I have my cube, and this will be my prefab. And I've also gone ahead and created a prefabs folder. You don't need to do this, but in order to instantiate this, I will drag the cube onto the bottom part. Now we can actually delete it from our scene. Next, we need to create the points where you want to instantiate it. So if you're making that FPS game, you might want to make one spawn point to be at the top of the cliff, etc., near the campfire. And if you're making the asteroid game or something similar, you might want to choose like every interval in the clouds. So I will start by making an empty game object by right clicking, and I'll set this to spawn points. I'll also reset the transform by setting the position to 0, 0, and 0. Making sure it's highlighted, I'll right click and create an empty object again. And so this one will also be at 0, 0, and 0 for me. And I'll just duplicate this a couple of times. And except I just want to offset these by a little. So for the first one, I'll do minus 10 on the x-axis. The second one, I'll do 10 on the x-axis. And then I'll duplicate the first one twice more. And then this one I'll offset by 10 on the y-axis. And then the last one, negative 10 on the y-axis. This is all up to you wherever you want to randomly instantiate your game object. Lastly, I'll make a script to instantiate our cube. So I'll add a component to our spawn points, and I'll enable it as spawner, and then I'll double click on it to open it up in Visual Studios. Okay, Visual Studios has loaded. What we're going to be needing to do is we're going to be needing to make a reference to A, the game object that we want to instantiate. B, we want to make a reference to all of our spawn points and decide where we want to spawn. So I'm actually going to delete our start function and make a couple of variables. The first one will be public game object, and this will be our prefab for the object we want to instantiate. Uh, Next, I'll create a public transform for the our spawn points. However, the problem with this is that this only makes one variable, and we want to make many, but to do it efficiently, I don't want to have to make each variable. So we can use a little trick by putting two brackets and making it into an array. An array is kind of like a list. So this holds a bunch of transforms that are labeled as spawn points, and we can iterate through each of them by calling spawn points. However, we simply pass through which index of spawn points. So inside of these two brackets, when we want to access it, I can pass in 1. This would talk about the first element in this transform. I can do 2, I can do 3, etc. So now that we made our array of all of our spawn locations, we can get started. So in void update, I'm gonna make a new function that checks for all of our input. So void check input, and I'll make one more function called void spawn go, which stands for gameObject. So in void check object, this will be how you determine whether you should spawn the game object or not, and how you're going to control that. So some games it should be automated by the computer every 10 seconds. Some games it should be when the player respawns. But for me, I'll just check if the user inputs uh, the key p code.p. If the user inputs this letter named p, then I will start this function called spawn go, and this function will happen. Now I just need to make a new transform to hold the location of which position we're choosing out of this spawn points. So spawn points is a list of position A, cliff. Let's take the cliff, the campfire, and let's take the waterfall. So it holds those three variables. Now let's make a new variable to hold which one of these we actually want to go. So public transform actual spawn. Can't spell. So now in void spawn go, I can do actual spawn. Actual spawn is equal to our list of spawn points. So spawn points, and now we just need to tell it which index of spawn points we want to talk about. And remember, we want to do randomly, so random dot range. And now we can pass through a couple of variables about what range. So remember, we want to start from 0, and we want to go to how big this array is. We want to check from the beginning of this list to the end of this list. So I will tell it the length of spawn points. So spawn points dot length. So now we make a new variable that stores a random location in this list of locations, if that makes sense. Now simply we just need to instantiate a game object at that position. So game object dot instantiate, and I will tell it, we need to tell it what object to instantiate, so prefab, and we need to tell it at what location. So I'll pass through actual spawn. Now if I save this by pressing Ctrl S, in summary, we check if the user presses the key P, and I made a little mistake. I should have put if input dot get key code.p. So if the user presses P, then we make a new variable that makes a random number that decides which position to go to, and then we instantiate the object at that position. So if I save this by pressing Ctrl S and go back into Unity, and if I click on our spawn points, it's asking for you can expand the spawn points. It's asking for a size. So I actually have 5 game objects. So I'll type in 5, and then I'll drag in each game object as an element of this list so that it knows the various places we are allowed to spawn. Oh. And for actual spawn, we don't want to put anything. Lastly, for our prefab, we can simply drag in our cube that we put in the bottom. And one more thing we can do to make this actual spawn disappear, because this is just a variable for the computer to use. This is not actually anything that we need in the inspector. So I'll label it as private in the script instead of public. Now if I save it again, go back into Unity, we'll find that it has disappeared and all of our spawn points has remained. So I'm actually going to save the project by file save. Now if we hit play, and you can see I have my game on the side and I have my scene here. So if I press P, oh, we actually made a tiny little bug which can be easily fixed. We want to make sure that we're checking our input each frame, and right now we simply just make our function that checks input, but we never tell the computer to actually run this piece of code. So in void update, which happens every frame, we can tell it to check input. If we save and go back into Unity, and then we run it one more time, and if I press P, we instantiated many game objects because the reason is when I press P, it is actually being held down. So for each second, it makes a new game object. But you can see it made a pretty random choice. It made one in each one. And if I wanted this to happen only each time I pressed it exactly, I can do I can change it from input.getKey to input.getKey down. So now it only happens the first time when you press your key down. If I press play once more, if I press P, I spawn here. And now I filled up all the slots, so it's gonna make it so you can't really see it. But you can see it's pretty random and it's at the spots where you want. And the more of these spawn points you make and you add them to our spawner script, the better it'll be. And the it'll just be more and more random. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful, and good luck with your games, you guys. And if you guys have any games that you guys are working on or following these tutorials, make sure to send me a link down below in the comments. Me and whoever else is reading this or watching this will be sure to check it out and have some fun. And, YouTube told me that 54% of you guys are subscribed, and the other 46 aren't, who watch my videos. So if you watch my videos and they help you, it would mean a lot if you could subscribe, because it doesn't cost anything and it helps me out a lot. Thank you.